Hello, Washington Commanders fans. I have two absolutely crucial pieces of news that will completely change the way you view not just the rest of this season, but especially the future of our franchise in the coming years. The first one involves a new draft simulation that just came out, showing us making a controversial pick in the first round, a type of player that typically isn't selected this high, but could be exactly what we need to transform our defense. And the second piece of news is even more urgent because it deals with an extremely complex elimination scenario that could happen as soon as next week, depending on several specific results around the league. Subscribe to the channel now and turn on all notifications because we will follow every detail of these scenarios in the coming weeks. And give that, like, if you still believe we can do something special, or if you're already looking ahead to the 2026 draft. Let's start by talking about this new draft simulation that's making waves among analysts and fans. If the 2025 NFL season ended today exactly as it is, the Washington Commanders would have one of the top 10 picks in the 2026 NFL Draft, which would be a privileged position to add elite talent. It has been an absolutely steep and painful decline compared to last year when we came so close to the Super Bowl, but after devastating injuries, brutally exposed serious roster issues, and obvious tactical flaws from the coaching staff, the team is at least in a position where it can add even more top-tier talent around quarterback Jayden Daniels and other promising young players. With the end of the recent bye week, we wanted to take another careful look at the future before returning to the more urgent and immediate matters of the current season. The projected first-round pick in this simulation is Caleb Downs, an extremely talented safety from Ohio State, and he is exactly the type of player who could inspire a team like the Commanders to abandon conventional market practices to have a cornerstone defender on the roster. The advancement of modern statistical analysis clearly shows that the safety position technically doesn't warrant such a high and precious draft investment when you have other more urgent needs. But if Washington can seek significant reinforcements on the defensive line, and even in other secondary positions through free agency, Downs could be the absolutely perfect addition in the first round, especially if the best available edge rushers have already been selected by other teams before our turn to pick, which is quite likely considering the widespread need for that position across the entire league. Downs is not just another common safety that you can easily find. He is a truly special player with unique skills that set him apart. He has the versatility to play both close to the line of scrimmage and in deep coverage, and this tactical flexibility would be extremely valuable for Dan Quinn to create more complex defensive schemes. Considering that our defense has been one of the biggest problems all season with players constantly out of position and allowing explosive plays, adding someone with Downs' game intelligence and natural instincts could be transformative. He would be that anchor type of player that allows you to do creative things, knowing that you always have someone reliable to cover mistakes or adjust in real time as plays develop. It would be an investment in the future of the defense that could pay dividends for years. With no second-round pick available due to the trade that brought left tackle Laremy Tunsil to the team, we move directly into the third round, where we project the Commanders to seek crucial reinforcements for the internal offensive line that has had its ups and downs. Specifically, the Auburn center named Connor Lew could be one of the smartest draft picks come April, as he could immediately compete for snaps on the defensive line and bring in healthy competition. Chris Paul has performed surprisingly well as a left guard this season and deserves credit for that, and center Tyler Biadasz is a fan and coaching staff favorite for good reason, but the overall efficiency of the offensive line this season is merely average when it comes to pass blocking, which definitely opens the door for competition and improvement through the draft. As long as Tunsil is under contract with the roster, and considering that Josh Conerly Jr. is only in his second season after being selected in the first round of the 2025 draft, we can't realistically imagine the front office seeking another offensive tackle early on in the first rounds. Therefore, the interior offensive line naturally becomes the best option available here in the third round. Some other extremely interesting names to keep an eye on during the third day of the draft include wide receiver Eugene Wilson III, coming out of Miami, Florida, who would not only significantly bolster the receiving core, but also contribute immediately as a quality kick returner, freeing up Deebo Samuel to focus exclusively on offense if the team can keep him under contract for 2026. Cornerback DJ McKinney from Colorado is another fascinating prospect with the ideal size and raw talent needed to be an interesting development project behind Trey Amos. Now let's move on to the second news item, which is extremely urgent and complex because it involves our playoff elimination scenarios coming up next week. The Washington Commanders have only one game left in November against the Broncos, and after that comes December football, universally considered the most crucial and decisive period of any NFL season. At least this is the case when you are seriously contending for a playoff spot, which technically is still the case for the Commanders right now, but we are dangerously close to being permanently eliminated this season. In fact, the competition is so incredibly tight and complicated that Washington could be mathematically eliminated as early as Week 13 if several specific factors align perfectly against us, which would be devastating to witness so soon. The absolutely determining factor for the possible early elimination of the Commanders next week will be set later this week when the Carolina Panthers and San Francisco 49ers face off on Monday Night Football, wrapping up Week 12. If you genuinely want Washington to stay alive in the hunt entering December with some mathematical hope, then you need to desperately root for a Panthers victory, as that would leave the teams in the 7th position of the NFC mathematically within our reach still. On the other hand, if you are already completely focused on next year's NFL draft and want the best possible draft position to grab elite players like that Caleb Downs we mentioned, then you actually want a 49ers win, which would put the Commanders in a position to be eliminated from the postseason if we lose our game and several other specific teams win their respective games in Week 13. Of course, if Washington can beat the Denver Broncos at home in that primetime game, currently considered underdogs by nearly a full touchdown by the bookmakers, then regardless of which team wins on Monday night between the Panthers and 49ers, the team will still mathematically be alive in the hunt. But if we lose in Week 13 after a 49ers win in Week 12, then 4 specific teams winning their games would definitively eliminate the Commanders. Those critical teams are San Francisco again playing against the Cleveland Browns, the Green Bay Packers facing the powerful Detroit Lions, the Seattle Seahawks against the Minnesota Vikings, and the Chicago Bears facing the Philadelphia Eagles. Currently, both the Bears and the Packers are considered significant underdogs in their respective Week 13 games, so there is mathematical hope. The best possible scenario to ensure we remain alive in the playoff hunt in Washington obviously starts with a crucial win over the Broncos in primetime when everyone will be watching. Then all the teams listed above need to lose their respective games, specifically including the Packers on Thanksgiving Day against the heavily favored Lions. Additionally, although that specific game does not have a direct influence on the mathematical elimination of the Commanders, a win by the Arizona Cardinals over the Tampa Bay Buccaneers would leave the loser of that game with a record of 6 wins and 6 losses and keep them in the tight race through December. The expected win of the Kansas City Chiefs over the Dallas Cowboys also on Thanksgiving Day helps Washington mathematically in an indirect way, as does a win by the Seattle Seahawks over the Minnesota Vikings the following weekend. Finally, while it may seem extremely contradictory and confusing at first glance, the chances of the Commanders actually catching the Philadelphia Eagles and winning the NFC East are even slimmer than the chances of a wildcard spot. Therefore, seeing them defeat the Chicago Bears in Week 13 is actually a surprising positive sign for us, as it keeps the Commanders technically alive in the wildcard race while increasing the Eagles' lead in the division. There are literally dozens of complex variables in play simultaneously, so the easiest and mentally healthiest way to look at this complicated situation is simply to intensely root for a Washington win against Denver and let the rest resolve itself naturally, which we will do by following every step of the way, regardless of the outcomes happening around the league. So the question I leave for you to ponder deeply and answer in the comments is, considering we have a small but real mathematical chance of making the playoffs if everything aligns perfectly, but also considering that an early elimination would give us a much better draft pick to snag transformative players like Caleb Downs, what do you, as a true fan, prefer at this moment in the season? To continue desperately fighting for that remote playoff chance, even if it means a worse draft pick and potentially wasting another precious year of Jaden Daniels' rookie contract, or to accept the reality that this season is already over and focus entirely on achieving the best possible draft position to finally build a roster that can truly compete in 2026?